Freddy Krueger here, and you're listening to Mike the Birdman Dodd and the rest of the crew this week in Geek.net.
And now it's time for another special feature.
Hey guys, what's going on? You are listening to ThisWeekInGeek.net. I'm your host, Mike the Birdman Dodd. And well, it has been a hot minute here on the show since we've had a chance to talk with somebody from the role-play game industry. Last month, we had a number of guests ranging from Star Wars to lands far away and even the world of 2000 AD and even in space where no one can hear you scream. We talked from a number of different worlds, franchises, and dimensions, you may even say. But we're going to go to a much darker place today, a world of darkness, you might even say. And we're going to be talking with Rich Thomas. He is the creative director over at Onyx Publishing, and these guys are responsible for bringing back World of Darkness as we know it. We've had Vampire, we've had Werewolf, we've had Mage, we've had Wraith, we've had a number of these big games we all knew from the 90s come back. And if you've been watching a lot of the video game presentations over the last 2 weeks and listening to our coverage over the last little bit, you know we've talked about Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, which comes out later on this year. Werewolf, I forget what its subtitle is, but it's based on Werewolf the Apocalypse, not Werewolf the Forsaken. That's going to be coming out sometime in the near future. And recently from the VR showcase, this one totally caught me by surprise, was Wraith the Oblivion as a VR game. And that's a property I don't really know a whole hell of a lot about, but you play a scary ghost, so why the hell not? I reached out to a person we interviewed at the end of April, and that was Phil Satiros Briccatos, and we talked about Mage the Awakening and Mage the Ascension, both a World of Darkness property I didn't know a whole lot about. And he said, hey, I know this guy. And he said that he could hook me up with Rich Thomas, as I just mentioned, is the founder, creative director, and many other hats over the years with the World of Darkness and White Wolf property. So I guess without any further ado, let's welcome Rich to the show.
Hi.
I just motor mouth a huge bunch of info dump and exposition on you, but I am excited to have you here, Rich, because I am intimately familiar with the World of Darkness since its inception in the late 80s into the 90s. And doing the research for you, it's cool to know that you have been responsible for the look of the World of Darkness since pretty much its inception.
Pretty much, yeah. I was working before Empire with the gang at White Wolf. And we started with White Wolf magazine, and that was, and this terrifies me when I do the math. But that was in 1986. I started with Stuart Wick on the magazine, and then as Empire was being created, I was involved. If you look in the first edition, about a third of the art in it was pieces that I did, not the Bradstreet pieces, obviously. But and then pretty much after those first couple of Empire books were created, I came down to join them because at that point, they could see that Vampire was something special. Vampire was doing stuff for White Wolf that nothing else had ever done before. And it was time to build the company.
So when you started working at kind of White Wolf, the industry, in my opinion, like there was D&D, there was like Shadowrun, there was Call of Cthulhu, like there were role-playing games, but Vampire did something different. It was the gothic punk setting, and no other role-playing game, at least to my knowledge, had really done that well. I mean, I guess you could argue maybe some of the cyberpunk stuff, but this was different. This was a different tone and feel to it. So what was it like developing the tone and atmosphere for this new and emerging game? Because when this game debuted at that early 90s Gen Con, this game blew up huge.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Vampire was like nothing anybody had seen before. I think a large part of it was that, visually speaking, and this carries through into the writing as well. the folks making it were depicting what exaggerated and artistic versions of what they were seeing around them every day. It was a much younger crew, and they would work all day in the office and then go out to various clubs, most of which were goth clubs or close to it. At least they had goth nights, and so this was the kind of taking that and saying, okay, well, this kind of environment, this punk goth thing that's going on that we're all kind of involved with, is energized and exciting and wild. And if there were vampires involved with this, if there were other supernaturals involved with this, wouldn't that be like this something totally fresh and new and cool? And that's kind of how they got started. But obviously on a visual level, there was sort of by taking that and saying that's what vampire is, that gave us kind of a baseline for then how could we do the other games? What would then werewolf look like as opposed to vampire? What would mage look like compared to vampire, and the kind of established what World of Darkness looks like as a whole?
One of the things that I've said when I've talked about the World of Darkness in other interviews is this was sort of the Marvel Cinematic Universe before there was an MCU. You guys had a shared universe, a shared history, which means you would have to have a shared aesthetic and how it felt. And you just mentioned that, like, you knew there was vampire, there was werewolf, there was mage, and everything else started to flow together into each other, such as changeling and wraith.
Well, there was an announced 5-year plan. Like, basically, when Vampire was published, it was said, we're also doing these next 4 things, one a year. And they're all going to build up what the World of Darkness is. And so that was huge. Like, we just made a 5-year commitment, and we hit it. We made it. It worked. That gave people, I think, a chance to say this. They're not kidding around. This thing is big and it's huge. It also made some folks think that we had a whole master, world document that's like giant black book that we consulted as we made these things. And no, it didn't quite work that way. It was each line was conceptualized and made to be what it needed to be. And then it fit into a kind of an amorphous part of the World of Darkness, and they weren't designed necessarily to be crossover games, because really nobody thought that people were going to be playing these things together. They thought vampires and lupines would be against each other. When the Gru came along, which were then the playable version of werewolves, I don't think that there was a lot of and my vampire buddy over here. In fact, a lot of the rules, a lot of the flavor and the rules were, you can smell, as a guru, you can smell the worm on this vampire. Oh, I got to kill it. So there's an antagonistic thing set up there, which really doesn't lend itself to adventuring parties.
But say that's one thing I always found super interesting, is how the lore between the races was so intertwined. And I'm so glad you brought up Werewolf, because that's a game I gravitated towards after I got into Vampire the Masquerade, because I myself am First Nations Canadian. I saw a lot of the Native American and Native Canadian spirituality kind of intertwined there. You mentioned the worm, the weaver, and stuff like that, different aspects of that. And that was into me. But say that's a part of me I felt represented in gaming. And games like Shadowrun had done it before with the Native American nations, arguably to a cartoonishly stereotype at a time, but at least we were powerful. This was something I felt more primal, more spiritual in that regard, because you talked about traveling into the kind of spirit realms and everything, and just
the Umbra.
Yeah, the Umbra. And there was this cool idea that there were different tribes, like the Glasswalkers, the Bone Gnawer, my favorite being the Children of Gaia, which for a long time, and I've never said this story on the air, when I was looking at my first tattoo in the mid-2000s, I very much considered getting a Children of Gaia tattoo, because that I always felt was my tribe.
Nice. And people have done exactly that with various tribes or other clan symbols or stuff like that. So that's the very first time someone sent me a pic or pulled their shirt up in a convention or whatever, and I saw my symbol etched into their skin forever. Like, what the heck are we doing here?
Well, that's the power of your art. The fact that it speaks to that, it has such a powerful connection to people. And with the World of Darkness, just having this huge meta plot in the 90s and into the early 2000s, it drew people in because I had never seen anything like that. Shadowrun maybe had it close where you'd see the meta plot unvolving. Yeah, like I think I dropped out of their meta plot after Renraku Arcology shut down, or basically just after 3rd edition launch for that one. I went fast. I was on its knees, basically. But yeah, like you guys had done something really special. And then you'd launched even more game lines. You had Demon the Fallen, Hunter the Reckoning, which is one of my favorite games of all time. And Mummy, I can't remember what its tagline was. That's that's it. And there was just so many different game lines and things worked together. And for a time, White Wolf was a juggernaut. It could not be stopped. There were people in my high school in a relatively small town of like 20,000 people talking about this. We had vampire LARPs. I remember this was in the news for a while. What was it like to see this company that started out with a bunch of kids in college? You were walking among giants then. You were the titan on the block.
It was very odd. And you have to remember that, like, for a lot of the people who create games, it's a more introverted process. You go off, you go into your work area, whatever you're comfortable doing, and if you're a writer, you're working away, working the ideas through. If you're an artist, of course, you're doing whatever media you're doing. And this, when we were doing this, very, very few artists were working on computers at any capacity. It was old school pen, paper, ink, paint. And it was, so it was, the fact that all of us could work together in an office was amazing. People would hide out in their cubicles and have to be called to meetings because I want to finish up this thing I'm writing. I had this great idea. Well, you got to go to do this thing. So the idea that then out there, people were getting incredibly excited about it, beyond, just going, oh yeah, that sounds fun to play. Let's go play that. But coming up with very, very involved backstories for their characters. And then once you brought the live action role playing into it, then you've got people dressing up like their characters. And you've got people who are going and renting spaces in cool places to do their role playing. We got a video from a group of people who put together a huge LARP in Florida where they had made some arrangement to rent a mall while it was like overnight, like from like Saturday night after the mall closed. They rented it until Sunday morning. And there were 400 people.
Oh, wow.
And we got this video showing all these people running around being the vampires we had described and talked about and put into the books and stuff. And we were sitting there in a little half circle around the TV in Mark's office, Mark Reinhagen. And I just looked at him. I said, this is your fault. Look at these people. This is all your fault. You came up with the original idea. And look here, this now 400 people are running around. He's like, yeah, it's great, isn't it? And it just blew us away. And this is before the internet. Like, this is before, like, I think there were nascent bulletin boards at that point. Like, just real rude communication. So everything was, we're getting letters or people coming up to us at conventions, and so we didn't know how widespread it was until after the fact. And people would tell us, really, that much? And then we kind of had to play catch up.
Yeah, I mean, like, Vampire really, in my opinion anyway, legitimized the LARPing community, because before that, I mean, everybody has seen the video of the kid in the woods shouting lightning bolt, but when Vampire came around, it was everyday people. Like there were ordinary goth kids, like 14 and up, LARPing.
Right.
There were adults doing it too. I mean, I joined my first vampire LARP when I was in my early 20s. Again, in this small town of 20,000 people, we play every Saturday night. And I've seen videos. I've also seen there's a documentary that came out a couple of years ago showing this big gathering. And I think it was in New Orleans. My friend,
Right. Grand Masquerade.
Yeah. And my friend Darla went to one, I think, in New Orleans, run by, I think it was called the Camarilla or something like that.
That's right.
And it just, I can't believe how many people showed up. The elaborate makeup and special effects.
Oh, some of it is absolutely gorgeous. Yeah.
There's this one girl, she dressed, I saw her in the documentary World of Darkness, which I said came out a couple of years ago. So yeah, just seeing this elaborate, Raveno's costume was so intense to me, because just seeing people that are willing to be vulnerable to use their special talents as artists and makeup people and costumers, I'd never seen that before. Like it was just something else.
Yeah, and people do. They spend an enormous amount of time and energy and talent coming up with the costumes. There's some amazing in one of the sub clans bloodlines. Gargoyles, and the gargoyles I've seen over the years have been absolutely Hollywood makeup quality, just gorgeous.
That's one of the things I've noticed about the World of Darkness community as I've started exploring communities like Reddit, some of the old school forum boards and websites, is just seeing how passionate this community can be about their creation. So one of the things that I noticed is, as with all good things must come to an end. And towards the end of the 90s, going into the 2000s, you guys did something called the Time of Judgment, which something that got me really excited, because this meant Gehenna was coming. The apocalypse was here. The hunters were being called up to fight all these creatures of darkness. And you guys were going to end it. Right. And I heard from several different sources, you guys had a rough idea what was going to happen. Like you'd always talked about it, but now the end is here. What are you going to do?
Right. Yeah, and that was it. It was a sort of all the game lines had sort of that doom hanging over them. And we got to the point where we knew that it was time to do something new. And one of the suggestions was, let's just do a 4th edition, because that was really what the editions had gotten up to, with at least Vampire. Do a 4th edition, try some of the new ideas that we have, try some different tweak the game system, all kinds of stuff like that. And so there were like 2 camps. And so the other one was, let's go ahead and go through with what we have sort of been promising all along, which is this Armageddon, this end of times thing. And let's do it all the way across, and let's end it and start again and do a new version of the same kind of themes that we were interested in, the supernatural creatures that live amongst us, but doing it in the way that's appropriate for the thousands rather than the 90s, and ultimately, with much arguing, that was the direction that we decided to go in. So yeah, it was then a question of, well, how do we want to present these things? And we ultimately went with less of we're going to end your meta plot, and more with we'll give you some options on how the meta plot can go, and you choose it at your table. So if you're reading it like a novel, it's not as satisfying. We had hoped that if you were playing it, it would give your table the chance to do it the way you wanted to end things.
So I guess my question would be, what is your canonical ending to the old World of Darkness?
So that's an unanswerable question, because of being so involved with bringing it back. When we started working on Vampire 20th Anniversary Edition, we were still all working for the company that merged with White Wolf, CCP, which is an Icelandic MMO company. Working there, and we realized that we were heading into the 20th anniversary of Vampire the Masquerade. It was heading into whatever that would be, and 2011. And we said, we have to do something. A lot of discussion. Turn it into do something for the fans. Okay, and we were just going to put out one really fancy book. Have all the clans in it, all the bloodlines that have ever been mentioned, all that sort of stuff pulled together into one book. Make it leatherette bound so it looks real fancy, like a tome, and that would be it. We really didn't know that there'd be the enthusiasm for that occurred, and as things were developing over with CCP and the project they were working on, with most of us were involved with, which was the late lamented World of Darkness MMO, we had an opportunity to say, how about we put out more Vampire 20th projects? We started on those, and then CCP decided that it was the project had been running way too long, and there were too many people involved with it, and they needed to do some layoffs. And a lot of the people they were laying off were old White Wolf employees I had hired. I really didn't feel good about that, and so I started looking for a way out myself, and managed to leave White Wolf and CCP and start Onyx Path in 2012 with the license to create tabletop RPGs, which they really didn't want us doing. CCP doing. They wanted us to do. They wanted to basically offload it to Onyx Path and say, you think you can still make a business out of doing tabletop RPGs? Go right ahead. We want to still focus on making our MMOs. And so that's what we did. So once we started building the world of V20, then we did Werewolf 20 and Mage 20, and basically we've done all the five, Wraith and Changeling 20 as well. At that point, it's very hard for me to then say, since we've been building from there, but really what I wanted to have happen was, a bolt of lightning to come down and kill, Cain, and all the vampires die. No. We brought them back. We brought the game back, and we don't want to think about that stuff.
That's fair. I mean, I always just thought it was one of the most ballsy moves that I'd ever seen in a game type of universe for you guys to do that. So when you moved on to create the other things, because I don't really know a whole lot about the Chronicles of Darkness world, and then I want to talk about some of the newer stuff. In a nutshell, you said you wanted to reinvent everything for the 2000s. Right. How would you encapsulate Vampire, the Requiem, Werewolf, the Forsaken, Mage, the Ascension? How would you put that together? Or Awakening, rather. How would you put those game lines in a very short kind of summary?
Well, if the World of Darkness 1 was all kinds of backstory and interwoven histories and all that sort of stuff, even though it wasn't essentially designed to do that, what we now call the Chronicles of Darkness, at the time it was the New World of Darkness, but the Chronicles of Darkness game lines are about starting with the idea that, yes, all of these various supernaturals exist in the world. Their rule sets are designed so that you have a commonality. You can see how they're designed. Playing groups of disparate, like two vampires and a werewolf and a mage, all doable. And a lot of it is a lot more about the here and now for your character tonight. And then there's backstory. But we were when we first were launching it, we wanted to do all of the cool backstory stuff, which some people do call metaplot, but I think they're two separate things. Metaplot sort of like the storyline going forward. Backstory is what happens before you step into play. That we were going to deliver all that stuff through fiction. We would have an enormous number of fiction books and various other ways of delivering it that weren't the game books, which were focused on what are you going to do tonight. And unfortunately, what happened when we were doing all this stuff is that as the bottom was dropping out of the RPG market at that time, we found that we could either work on the RPG books and put more of those out, or we could work on the fiction, but we didn't have the bandwidth to work on both. And so fiction was left to kind of drift, and that meant we didn't deliver the kind of backstory that we wanted to. And so I think we have come back around on that. Onyx Path has done second editions of all the Chronicles of Darkness game line. So there's Vampire the Requiem second edition, and in there we have added a lot more background, and I think it's a richer experience. But the general idea was personal horror.
Okay. Yeah, because I never understood Chronicles of Darkness, and I guess I was so afraid to let go of my old kind of meta plot I was unwilling to learn. But now that you've kind of explained it, I like how now I know it is set up differently. There is background built in if I want to use it. And
yep.
I'm willing. Really. Yeah, exactly. Now I have a new set of tools to take a look at it, because now I have friends who love Chronicles of Darkness but haven't played Old World of Darkness. So now I need to see their world through my eyes, or however that phrasing goes. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's relatively easy to, if you really loved a particular way that something happened in the World of Darkness, to bring that into your personal game with Chronicles of Darkness things, because it is a toolbox, and I think we've provided with second edition really robust set of tools. That we've learned from the first edition what to do, and I think that you can do that, or you can take it off into extremely personal directions, depending on what everybody wants to do around the table.
One of the things I do like about the Chronicles of Darkness, and I've only ever heard stories about this, is I love the new clans, how they sit there. There's a lot fewer of them, but I love their setup, like the Lanti, a Sanctum, the Ordo Dracul, which I think is one of the coolest names I've ever heard. Just because it sounds cool to roll off the tongue.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
It's so fun in like that regard. But Onyx Path has moved forward, and now you guys work with a different company now to produce other material, because I think you guys work with Paradox Interactive, correct?
Yeah, it's So what basically happened was, to give you the timeline of, we have the original White Wolf, and the original White Wolf merges with CCP, like I said, an Icelandic MMO company, with the idea of creating an MMO for the World of Darkness. That goes on for a little while. Many years are spent attempting to make that happen. Ultimately, CCP looks at the whole situation and goes, "It's taken this long. We still don't have what we want, and there's we've spent a lot of money on this project. It's time for us to cut the cord." And the way that they did that was they sold White Wolf, the White Wolf part of it, all the White Wolf IPs, the intellectual properties, which are all the game lines, and the name, to Paradox. And then Paradox spun off a company, coincidentally, called White Wolf. And they started to work on Vampire 5th edition. So if you consider the Vampire 20th anniversary edition is 4th edition, this would be the what we have now is the 5th edition.
Okay, yeah, because I was always very curious to know how that relationship has worked. And now White Wolf has become, or the World of Darkness properties rather, have become a very hot topic among gamers. As I mentioned during my intro there, we've seen some really cool stuff come out. I mean, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, a long time coming, is going to be coming to consoles and PCs later on this year, presumably.
Very exciting, yeah.
The collector's edition looks really neat. You get a copy of the 5th edition book in PDF form. I was hoping for physical, but I'll take what I can get. There's also a poster map with it, a soundtrack, a map of Seattle, steelbook. Looks cool. And then 2 surprise announcements. I didn't expect there to be a brand new Werewolf game announced, especially Werewolf the Apocalypse, which is, like I said, a favorite game line of mine. And then this got announced, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, about Wraith the Oblivion as a VR experience.
I think it's going to be scary as hell. That, to me, the VR and Wraith together is wow. There was a minor I shouldn't say minor, but let's say a beginning version of that was being messed around with a few years ago using voice activated material. So you're basically role playing to a machine that was also doing music and sound effects and stuff like that. And even that was spooky. And I mean, people would jump, when they were playing. So VR version, oh, that's going to be nuts. But the thing with that is like what Paradox has done is they've said today where it's not just about making tabletop RPG books. They have all these. They're a computer game company at heart. We have all these connections, so we're going to talk to these other companies and license out so they can do this game in this game setting and this game in this game setting and things like that. So that's really been their plan all along. And tabletop RPGs have been the heart of it, the core of it, but a lot wider use of licensing than we were back in the day. White Wolf was capable of hooking up with, because go to Hollywood and say, "Hey, make a movie about vampire." Kid round. So,
I mean, it's cool to see more World of Darkness properties get adapted, because I unfortunately didn't have a computer powerful enough to run Vampire the Masquerade back in the day. All I ever had to play was the Hunter games, which are
on console.
Yeah, on console, and varying quality, but I got to kill monsters, so yay me. But I'm hoping to see more as time goes on. I mean, I'm hoping to see the World of Darkness live on the small screen or the big screen again, because I know we had Kindred the Embraced at one point, and think of that what you will, but I got to see Bruja,
right.
And Brian Thompson, the alien bounty hunter.
I know. It was I think the first couple of times I remember seeing him. Very memorable, imposing presence on the screen.
Yeah, like I'm hoping that we see more World of Darkness stuff as time goes on, because I think it's never gone away. Like, it's always stayed popular. I mean, like Onyx Path, you guys do so much stuff. I know you guys did a virtual convention not too long ago, correct?
This last weekend, yeah. We're still recovering.
And that's so exciting. I'm so happy to see the vampires, the werewolves, the mages, the wraiths, and all the other denizens of darkness come together in such a powerful community. And I'm so happy to see that it's endured for over 20 years.
Oh, hey, we're heading towards 30 right now. Like 91 was when Masquerade first edition came out.
Wow.
It's actually more towards 30. Yeah. It's the thing for us is, we're still concentrating on tabletop RPGs. The license we have that was originally with CCP to do the tabletop gaming for Exalted, for Chronicles of Darkness, for World of Darkness, all of that transferred over with the sale to Paradox, and we have continued on doing things. When they moved to Vampire 5th Edition, which they did in-house, we have produced Chicago by Night 5th Edition, and some other supplements that they kind of spun off from that, from Chicago's Kickstarter. And then we did Cults of the Blood Gods. Blood Gods. It's not Games Workshop. And subsequent things like that. So we're continuing to create, like you mentioned, Satiros Bucato, working with Phil on Mage 20th projects and things like that. So yeah, we're really happy to still be working within the World of Darkness, whether it's the new 5th edition work, or the really the V20 sort of compilations of all the previous editions all at once, stuff that we've been doing for years now. The other thing I wanted to mention is that when we left, because there are other game lines that we also do, some of them were ones that I worked on when I was at White Wolf and helped create, that DCP was very gracious in allowing me to actually purchase the rights to. So Onyx Path owns the rights to the game line Scion, the Trinity Continuum. So that's it's Aeon and Aberrant and Adventure, and Scarlands, which was White Wolf's entry into the Die 20 craze, and has been updated to 5th edition D&D.
Oh wow! Like I'm so impressed with how far White Wolf and Onyx Path has come. I'm so happy to see these game lines continue. So I guess as my final question to you, Rich, if you were to leave the RPG industry today, what would you want your lasting legacy to be if it could only be one or two things?
Oh, well, I mean, in a sense, that's really what Onyx Path is all about, is to sort of move forward and do more things in what we do, create more art. I've been all over the place. Like I said, I started as an illustrator and then as an art director for the magazine, and then for White Wolf as a total. I think that if there is any legacy from those years, it's having raised the bar for what kind of what game products look like. We had a lot of great shoulders to stand on. The projects, Shadowrun's art and art direction team was phenomenal. But I think we really did manage to raise the bar, and it continues on and inspires people to do more and even more involved work that way. On a game creation level, I would really hope that it's less about a single individual game and more about you can make really cool games for the kind of subjects that turn you on and that you want to play. You just have to, make it happen. That's really what we've done with Onyx Path.
So I guess if people want to find out more about Onyx Path, where would they have to go online?
Well, our website is www.theonyxpath.com, THE, onyxpath.com. But we are all over social media. I don't have all of the ID things on a list. I really should. I'd just be able to read them off to you. But we're on Twitter. We're definitely on Facebook. We have our own Facebook page, but we also have pages for the game lines. We are on Discord. I believe we're also on Slack, but I don't go over there that often. And when we do things like the virtual Onyx Path Gaming Convention, that is something that we try to blast off through all of our social media things. But we always find out that people haven't heard about Y or Z. They weren't checking that when that message came through. So it's a constant struggle to get the word out there through everything we've got. But it's been great.
Well, Rich, I gotta thank you for spending time with us here on This Week in Geek. So once again, guys, that was my interview with Rich Thomas. He is the creative director over at Onyx Path. Please go check out their stuff. They are available on the website. He has mentioned you can also buy their products over at drivethrurpg.com as well. And like I said, check all their socials.
And your local gaming stores.
Yes, do that.
When they come back.
Brick and mortar needs you now more than ever.
More than ever.
So until next time, folks, I've been Mike the Birdman Dodd, trying out my new sign-off for hopefully the rest of my career, saying be excellent to each other. We'll catch you guys again next time, right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
Well, that's our show. All right, here's the deal. Every time you watch my show, I will send you $40.
Checks will not be honored.
You've been listening to This Week in Geek, your source for guaranteed nonsense or your money back. Tune in next week for more info on the most important things you didn't need to know. Check out our website at ThisWeekInGeek.net and subscribe to our podcast through iTunes or any podcatcher. If you'd like to comment on this episode, head over to this episode's post at ThisWeekInGeek.net and leave a comment through Facebook Connect. Follow us on Twitter at ThisWeekInGeek.net and follow our Instagram at twig_official_podcast. Social media not your thing? Send us an email at feedback@ThisWeekInGeek.net. We'll see you next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
Just when you think this show is terrible, something wonderful happens.
What?
It ends.
I have to go. Somewhere there is a crime happening.